The dust hadn't even settled when Running Wolf rode back into camp that hot August evening in 1869. His horse was breathing hard, foam gathering at its mouth. Behind him, a line of warriors brought back what they'd taken from the Texas settlement: horses, blankets, cooking pots, and 3 prisoners tied with leather ropes. Running Wolf was 32 years old, a man the Pentecoca Comanche respected. He'd led many raids before, but this one felt different, heavier somehow. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was something else he couldn't quite name. The whole camp came out to see what the warriors had brought back. Children ran alongside the horses. Women called out to their husbands and sons. Old men nodded in approval at the string of horses. It was a successful raid by any measure. Among the prisoners was a white woman. She wasn't young, maybe 28 or so, with reddish-brown hair that had come loose from its pins. Her dress was torn at the sleeve and there was a bruise forming on her cheek. But what caught people's attention were her eyes. They weren't filled with the terror most captives showed. Instead, they burned with something closer to anger. Her name was Catherine, though no one in the camp knew that yet. Back in that settlement, she'd grabbed a rifle when the warriors came. She'd actually fired it too, though her shot went wide. It took 2 men to pull her off her feet, and even then she'd kicked one of them hard enough that he was still limping. Running Wolf had seen plenty of captives over the years. Some cried, some begged, some went silent with shock. This one was different. She held her head up even with her hands bound. When their eyes met for a brief moment, she didn't look away. The prisoners were led to the center of camp where the elders would decide their fate. Some captives were kept as workers. Others were adopted into families who'd lost children. Some were traded or ransomed back to the settlements. It all depended on many things, but Running Wolf wasn't thinking much about the prisoners. His mind was on his son. Little Hawk was 7 years old, small for his age, with dark eyes that used to sparkle with mischief. Used to, that was the problem. For the past 6 months, those eyes had been empty, hollow, ever since his mother died. Singing Bird had been Running Wolf's wife for 9 years. She died of a fever that swept through the camp last winter. The medicine man tried everything. Running Wolf stayed by her side for 3 days and nights. But the fever took her anyway, like it had taken so many others. Little Hawk hadn't spoken more than a handful of words since then. He didn't play with the other children anymore. He didn't laugh. He barely ate. Running Wolf's mother, Gray Dove, tried everything she could think of. She cooked his favorite foods. She told him stories. She even let him sleep in her teepee when the nightmares got bad. Nothing worked. The boy was fading like a plant without water. Running Wolf dismounted and scanned the crowd for his son. He found him standing next to Gray Dove, half hidden behind her skirts. The old woman's hand rested protectively on the boy's shoulder. "Little Hawk," Running Wolf called out, trying to keep his voice warm. "Come see what we brought back." The boy didn't move. He just stared at the ground. Gray Dove gave him a gentle push. "Go to your father." Slowly, so slowly, Little Hawk walked forward. His feet dragged in the dirt. He looked like he was walking to his own execution rather than to greet his father after a successful raid. Running Wolf knelt down so he was eye level with his son. "We brought back many horses," he said. "Good, strong horses." But Little Hawk wasn't looking at him. The boy's gaze had drifted past his father to the prisoners standing in the center of camp. Specifically to the white woman with the burning eyes. She was looking around the camp, taking everything in. Not with fear, but with the sharp attention of someone trying to understand a new situation. When one of the warriors pushed her shoulder to make her sit, she resisted for a moment before lowering herself to the ground with dignity intact. Little Hawk watched all of this. And for the first time in 6 months, something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like interest. Running Wolf followed his son's gaze. "The prisoners?" he asked. "They're nothing for you to worry about." But Little Hawk kept staring. The woman had noticed his attention now. She looked back at him and her expression softened slightly. Not much, just a small change around her eyes. But it was there. Then Little Hawk did something that made everyone nearby fall silent. He spoke. That one. His voice was rough from months of disuse, barely more than a whisper. But every word was clear. "She is strong like Mother was." Running Wolf felt like he'd been struck. Those were the most words his son had strung together since Singing Bird died. And what words they were. Gray Dove had pushed through the crowd. "What did he say?" she demanded. Little Hawk turned to his father. His small hand reached out and gripped Running Wolf's arm with surprising strength. "That one," he repeated, pointing at Catherine. "I want her." The people around them began murmuring. This wasn't how things were done. Children didn't choose captives. Warriors decided among themselves, or the council made the decision. A 7-year-old boy had no say in such matters, but Running Wolf couldn't stop staring at his son's face. There was life in it again, real life. The emptiness had cracked just a little. "Little Hawk," he said carefully, "you don't understand what you're asking." "I do." The boy's jaw set in a way that reminded Running Wolf painfully of Singing Bird when she'd made up her mind about something. She fought back. "She didn't cry. She's strong. She's white," Grey Dove said sharply. "She's our enemy. Mother always said the Comanche are strong because we make the brave ones join us," Little Hawk replied. "You told me that story, about how grandfather was captured from another tribe when he was young, and he became one of the greatest warriors." Grey Dove's mouth snapped shut. The boy was right. That was exactly the story she'd told him many times. Running Wolf looked at Catherine again. She was still watching them, though she clearly couldn't understand what was being said. There was something in her bearing, though, a kind of strength that wasn't common even among their own people. But taking a white captive into his lodge, making her part of his family, that was complicated in ways his son couldn't understand. White captives brought attention from the army. They brought problems. They brought risk, and yet his son was speaking again. His son was showing interest in something, anything, for the first time since his world had shattered. "We'll see," Running Wolf said finally. "The council must decide about the prisoners first. Then tell the council," Little Hawk said with surprising firmness. "Tell them I choose her." The boy turned and walked back to Grey Dove, who gathered him against her side with a troubled expression. She met Running Wolf's eyes over the child's head, and her look said clearly, "What are you going to do about this?" Running Wolf didn't have an answer. He rose to his feet and looked at the white woman one more time. Catherine stared back, still unafraid, still defiant, completely unaware that a grieving child had just changed the course of her life. The sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and purple. The camp began to settle for the evening, but Running Wolf knew there would be little sleep for him tonight. His son had spoken. His son had made a choice. And somehow Running Wolf knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The council meeting lasted 3 hours. Catherine sat outside Running Wolf's teepee with her hands still bound, listening to voices rise and fall in a language she didn't understand. She'd expected worse by now, expected violence or cruelty. Instead, she'd been given water and left alone while the men argued about something. When Running Wolf finally emerged, his face was unreadable. He said something in Comanche, then cut the ropes around her wrists. Catherine rubbed the raw skin, watching him carefully. "You work," he said in broken English, gesturing toward his teepee. "You stay here." That was all the explanation she got. But it was enough to understand her immediate future. She was his captive now, his property essentially. She'd heard stories about what happened to white women taken by Comanche. Most of those stories ended badly. Grey Dove appeared from the shadows like she'd been waiting. The old woman looked Catherine up and down with cold, measuring eyes. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, and though Catherine couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear enough. "This woman didn't want her here," Running Wolf replied calmly, and Grey Dove's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned and went into the teepee without another word. Catherine stood there in the darkness, alone in a camp full of people who had every reason to hate her. She thought about her husband, dead 2 years now from cholera. She thought about the small house she'd been trying to maintain by herself. She thought about how she'd fought when the warriors came, and how part of her wondered if she should have fought harder, made them kill her rather than take her. But she was alive, and as long as she was alive, there was a chance. The next morning started before dawn. Grey Dove shook Catherine awake roughly and thrust a leather bucket into her hands. She pointed toward the creek and made a carrying motion. Water. Catherine needed to fetch water. The walk to the creek gave her the first real look at the camp in daylight. There were maybe 40 teepees arranged in a loose circle. Horses grazed in a makeshift corral. Women were already up, tending fires, preparing food. Children were starting to wake, and everyone stared at her. Catherine kept her head up and her back straight as she filled the bucket. She'd been a farmer's wife. She'd birthed a stillborn baby alone when her husband was away. She'd survived a harsh winter with almost no food. She wouldn't break now. When she returned, Grey Dove was waiting with a list of chores that seemed endless. Scrape this hide, mend these clothes, gather firewood, grind corn, cook, clean. Every time Catherine finished one task, Grey Dove pointed to another. The old woman never smiled, never offered encouragement. She watched Catherine like a hawk watches a snake, waiting for the moment to strike. But Catherine had worked hard her whole life. She knew how to push through exhaustion. She knew how to keep going when everything hurt. So she did the work without complaint, even though her shoulder ached and her hands blistered. It was mid-morning when she first saw Little Hawk again. The boy was sitting alone near the edge of camp, drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. Other children ran past him playing some kind of game, but he didn't join in. He just sat there isolated in his own world. Catherine was carrying firewood back to the teepee when she passed near him. She slowed her steps, curious about this child who had somehow chosen her. She couldn't understand why. She barely understood what had happened at all. Little Hawk looked up and their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the boy stood and began following her at a distance. Grey Dove noticed immediately. She said something sharp in Comanche, probably telling the boy to go away. But Little Hawk ignored her. He stayed about 10 feet behind Catherine, watching everything she did. This became the pattern. Every day, Catherine worked under Grey Dove's suspicious eye, and Little Hawk shadowed her like a quiet ghost. He never spoke to her, never came close enough to touch. He just watched. Running Wolf watched too, though he tried to be less obvious about it. Catherine would catch glimpses of him throughout the day, always somewhere nearby. She couldn't read his expression. Sometimes he looked troubled, sometimes thoughtful, never cruel, which was something. A week passed this way, then 2. Catherine learned to recognize a few Comanche words by hearing them repeated. She learned which women would meet her eyes and which turned away. She learned the rhythm of camp life, the routines that marked each day, and slowly, she began to notice things about Little Hawk. The boy's clothes were mended poorly, with uneven stitches that wouldn't hold for long. His hair was clean but not braided the way other boys wore it. He ate mechanically, like food was just something that kept him alive rather than something to enjoy. He was grieving. Catherine recognized it because she'd been there herself after her husband died. That hollow emptiness that made the world feel distant and unreal. One afternoon she found him sitting alone again, trying to fix a tear in his moccasin. His small fingers fumbled with the leather cord, pulling it too tight, then too loose. He was getting frustrated, his jaw clenched in determination. Catherine had been gathering herbs for Grey Dove. She should have walked past, should have minded her own business, but something about the sight of that small boy struggling alone broke through her careful walls. She set down her basket and sat near him. Not too close, just close enough. Little Hawk froze, the leather cord still in his hands. Catherine held out her hand slowly, palm up, a request, not a demand. After a moment, Little Hawk handed her the moccasin. She examined the tear. It was a simple fix, really. She pulled out the clumsy stitches he'd made and started fresh, her fingers working with the practiced ease of someone who'd mended countless things over the years. As she worked, she began to hum. It was old tune her own mother used to sing, something soft and wordless that had always brought her comfort. She didn't even realize she was doing it at first, but Little Hawk did. The boy's entire body went still, his eyes filled with tears that he fought to keep from falling. Catherine's hands paused. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the pain written so clearly on his young face. This child was drowning in grief, and no one seemed to know how to reach him. She finished the repair and handed back the moccasin. Little Hawk took it with trembling hands. For a moment she thought he might run away. Instead, he whispered something in Comanche, just 2 words so quiet she almost missed them. Catherine didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was thank you, or maybe something deeper than that. From that day forward, Little Hawk stayed closer, not just watching anymore, but present. When Catherine sat to rest for a moment, he would sit nearby. When she worked, he would help in small ways, carrying things, holding tools, fetching water before she asked. Grey Dove noticed the change. Her disapproval grew sharper, her commands more curt. She made sure Catherine never had a moment to rest, never had time to talk to the boy, Not that they could understand each other anyway. But Running Wolf noticed too. Catherine would catch him watching them with an expression she couldn't quite name, something between worry and hope. 3 weeks after her capture, Little Hawk brought her something. It was a small carved bird no bigger than her thumb, made from a piece of smooth wood. The craftsmanship was crude, clearly a child's work, but the effort behind it was enormous. He placed it in her hand without a word, then ran off before she could react. Catherine stood there holding that tiny wooden bird, and for the first time since the raid, she felt tears prick her eyes, not tears of fear or despair. Something else, something she couldn't quite name. That night, as she lay on the hard ground near the fire, she could hear Little Hawk's breathing from where he slept on the other side of the teepee. Steady, peaceful, not the restless, nightmare-plagued sleep Gray Dove had quietly mentioned he'd suffered for months. Catherine closed her fingers around the carved bird and stared up at the smoke hole in the teepee's center, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. She didn't understand what was happening, didn't understand why this boy had chosen her or what any of it meant. But she knew one thing with sudden certainty. She would protect him. Whatever came next, whatever happened, she would not let this grieving child face his pain alone. It was the first choice she'd made since the raid that felt entirely her own. And somehow, making it, she felt a little less like a captive and a little more like a person again. The first cold snap came in late October, and with it a summons that made the entire camp go quiet. The tribal council was meeting. Not just the elders this time, but the full council with all the warriors present. Word spread quickly through the teepees. They were going to discuss the prisoners, specifically what to do with them long term. Catherine had learned enough Comanche by now to catch fragments of conversations. She understood that 2 of the other captives had already been traded to another band. That left her. Gray Dove was unusually tense that morning. She moved around the teepee with sharp, angry movements, muttering under her breath. Catherine caught one word she'd learned well: white. The old woman kept saying it like a curse. Little Hawk stuck close to Catherine all morning. Closer than usual. He seemed to sense that something important was happening, and it scared him. Running Wolf left for the council meeting without looking at either of them. His face was set like stone. The meeting lasted hours. Catherine tried to work, tried to stay busy, but her hands shook. She'd been a captive for 3 months now. 3 months of hard work, of learning a new language, of existing in this strange liminal space between prisoner and something else. She'd heard what happened to captives no one wanted. Sometimes they were sold to Mexican traders. Sometimes they were simply turned out to die in the wilderness. Sometimes worse. Little Hawk sat beside her, pressing his small body against her side. She put her arm around him without thinking, and he didn't pull away. When the council finally ended, men began emerging from the large central teepee. Their faces were serious, some angry. Warriors argued in tight groups. Whatever had been decided, not everyone agreed with it. Running Wolf appeared in the doorway of his teepee. His expression was impossible to read. "Come," he said to Catherine in English. She stood on shaking legs. Little Hawk immediately grabbed her hand. They walked to the center of camp where the elders still sat in a semicircle. The entire tribe had gathered to hear the council's decision. Catherine could feel hundreds of eyes on her. One of the elders stood. He was ancient, his face creased with 1,000 wrinkles, his long hair pure white. When he spoke, his voice carried across the camp with surprising strength. Catherine couldn't understand most of his words, but she caught fragments. Something about tradition, something about strength, something about the boy. Then Little Hawk did something that made Catherine's heart stop. The 7-year-old released her hand and walked forward to stand before the council of elders, alone. His small figure looked impossibly tiny facing those powerful men. Gray Dove made a sound of protest, but Running Wolf held up his hand to stop her. Little Hawk's voice rang out clear in the evening air. Catherine couldn't understand everything he said, but she heard her own name, the Comanche version they'd started calling her. She heard him say mother. She heard the word for choose. The boy was speaking to the council, addressing them directly. From the shocked faces around the camp, this wasn't something children did. Little Hawk spoke for maybe 2 minutes. His voice never wavered. When he finished, he turned. Ed and looked directly at Catherine. His eyes held a pleading she couldn't ignore. Then he said in careful English, words he must have practiced, "You are my mother now. I choose you." The camp erupted. Warriors shouted. Women gasped. Grey Dove's face went pale. Running Wolf stood frozen, staring at his son with an expression of pure shock. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't this. The old elder raised his hand and slowly the camp fell silent again. He looked at Little Hawk for a long moment, then at Catherine, then at Running Wolf. He spoke, and this time someone translated for Catherine in broken English. A woman from a nearby teepee who'd learned some English from traders. "The boy has invoked an old right," the woman whispered. "Very old. A child who has lost their mother can choose a new one, even from captives if the father allows it. But it must be done before the council. It must be declared publicly." Catherine's legs felt weak. "What does that mean?" "It means," the woman said slowly, "if Running Wolf accepts, you become his wife. You become Comanche, completely, no going back." Catherine looked at Running Wolf. He was staring at his son with something that looked like awe and terror mixed together. The old elder spoke again, addressing Running Wolf directly. The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Running Wolf's jaw clenched. He looked at his son, at Catherine, at his mother whose face was twisted with disapproval, at the gathered tribe. The silence stretched so long Catherine thought she might scream. Then Little Hawk did something that broke the moment. He started to cry. Not loud, dramatic tears, but quiet ones that rolled down his cheeks as his small body shook. "Please, Father," he said in Comanche, his voice breaking. "Please don't let her go. I can't lose another mother." "I can't." Running Wolf's carefully controlled expression cracked. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. He walked to his son and knelt before him. He said something too quiet for Catherine to hear, but she saw Little Hawk nod desperately. Saw Running Wolf wipe his son's tears with gentle hands. Then Running Wolf stood and faced the council. He spoke clearly, and though Catherine still couldn't understand all the words, she understood the decision in his voice. The old elder nodded slowly. He said something that made half the camp cheer and the other half grumble. Then he looked at Catherine and spoke directly to her. The translator whispered, "He asks if you accept, if you choose to become Comanche, to be this boy's mother and this man's wife. He says you must answer true, because there is no dishonor in saying no. But if you say yes, it is forever. Forever." Catherine looked at Little Hawk's tear-stained face, at Running Wolf's uncertain expression, at the camp full of people who had been her enemies 3 months ago. She thought about her old life, the empty house, the loneliness after her husband died, the settlement where everyone had pitied her but no one had really known her. She thought about the wooden bird Little Hawk had carved for her, which she kept tucked in her dress. About the way he'd started smiling again these past weeks. About how Running Wolf had never once been cruel to her, even when he had every right to be. She thought about the fact that she'd somehow stopped thinking about escape weeks ago. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I accept." The camp exploded with noise again. Some people cheered. Others shouted in anger. Grey Dove turned and walked away, her back rigid with fury. But Little Hawk ran to Catherine and threw his arms around her waist, sobbing into her dress. She knelt and held him tight. This child who had chosen her, who had somehow seen something in her worth fighting for. Running Wolf approached slowly. He said something in Comanche, and when Catherine looked confused, he switched to English. "The council says you must prove yourself," he said. "They do not trust you because you are white. They will watch for betrayal. Any sign you help the army or try to escape and—" He didn't finish, but the implication was clear. "I understand," Catherine said. "Do you?" His dark eyes searched her face. "This is not a game. If you accept this, you become Comanche. Their ways become your ways. Their enemies become your enemies. You would fight your own people if they attacked us." Catherine looked down at Little Hawk, still clinging to her. She thought about what the word mother really meant. Not just a title, a commitment, a promise to protect and love and sacrifice. "They stopped being my people the moment I said yes," she whispered. Something shifted in Running Wolf's expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. The old elder spoke again, giving instructions. The ceremony would happen in 3 days, after Catherine had time to prepare and learn what would be expected of her. As the crowd dispersed, Running Wolf touched her shoulder briefly. "My son believes in you," he said. "Now I must learn to as well." He walked away, leaving Catherine standing with Little Hawk still wrapped around her. Gray Dove returned as the sun set. She didn't speak to Catherine, but she began teaching her sharply, impatiently, the customs she would need to know. The words she must say, the rituals she must perform. The old woman's disapproval radiated like heat from a fire, but she did her duty. Because the council had decided, and Gray Dove, for all her anger, respected the old ways. That night, Catherine lay awake thinking about the impossible thing that had just happened. She was going to marry a Comanche warrior she barely knew. She was going to become mother to a grieving boy who had claimed her as his own. She was going to join a people who had every reason to hate her. And the strangest part was, she didn't feel trapped. She felt for the first time in years like she belonged somewhere. Little Hawk slept peacefully across the fire, his breathing steady and deep. No nightmares tonight. Whatever tomorrow brought, she had given him that much. It would have to be enough. The ceremony happened on a cold November morning. Catherine wore a dress made of soft deerskin that Gray Dove had prepared. The old woman's hands had been rough while helping her dress, but they'd been steady. Not kind, but not cruel either. Running Wolf gave Catherine a new name that day. In Comanche, it meant Braveheart Woman. The elders spoke blessings. Little Hawk stood between them, holding both their hands, his face shining with something that looked like hope. But hope was a fragile thing. Catherine learned that quickly. The other women kept their distance. When she tried to help with communal tasks, they found reasons to move away. When she spoke, conversations would die. Only a few would meet her eyes, and even they looked uncertain, like they were breaking some unspoken rule. Gray Dove remained cold. She taught Catherine what she needed to know, but always with sharp words and sharper looks. "You must do better," she'd say when Catherine made a mistake. Comanche women do not fail at simple tasks. Running Wolf was formal and distant. He gave her space in the teepee, respected her, treated her with courtesy. But there was a wall between them made of doubt and uncertainty. He watched her constantly, and Catherine knew what he was looking for. Signs of betrayal, signs she would run, signs she'd lied about her commitment. She hadn't lied, but proving that would take more than words. Little Hawk was the only bright spot. The boy followed her everywhere, helped with her work, taught her Comanche words. He smiled now, really smiled, and sometimes even laughed. At night he would fall asleep quickly, peacefully curled near the fire. Watching him heal made everything else bearable. 2 months passed like this. Winter deepened. Snow covered the ground. Catherine learned to tan hides properly, to make pemmican, to recognize medicinal plants even in their winter dormancy. Her hands grew calloused. Her skin darkened from constant outdoor work. Her Comanche improved daily, but she was still an outsider, still watched, still not fully trusted. Then came the morning that changed everything. Catherine woke to chaos. Shouts rang through the camp. Horses screamed. Running Wolf was already up, grabbing his weapons. "What's happening?" Catherine asked. "Raiders," he said tersely. "From the north. Stay inside with Little Hawk." He was gone before she could respond. Through the teepee's opening, Catherine could see warriors mounting horses, women grabbing children, elders organizing defense. This wasn't a drill. This was real. A rival band was attacking. Little Hawk pressed against Catherine's side, trembling. "They want our horses," he whispered. "They've come before. People died." Catherine pulled him close and peered outside. The attacking warriors were already at the edge of camp, maybe 20 of them. They had the advantage of surprise and dawn's dim light. The battle erupted fast and brutal. The clash of weapons, the thunder of hooves, screams of pain and rage. Catherine saw Running Wolf in the thick of it, fighting 2 men at once. "Stay here," she told Little Hawk firmly. "Where are you going?" His eyes went wide with fear. "To help defend the children." She grabbed a heavy stick from the firewood pile. It wasn't much, but it was something. Outside, she saw that the Comanche women weren't cowering. They'd gathered the children into the center of camp and formed a protective circle around them. Several held weapons, knives, clubs, anything they could find. Catherine ran to join them. One of the women, the same one who'd translated for her at the council, looked at her in shock. "You should hide," she said. You're white. If they see you, I'm Comanche now, Catherine said, gripping her stick tighter. That's what I said. Time to prove it. An attacker broke through the line of warriors on horseback, heading straight for the children. He was aiming to scatter them, create make them easier targets. Catherine didn't think. She just moved. She ran at the horse from the side, screaming as loud as she could. The horse shied, stumbling. The rider cursed and turned toward her, raising a club. Catherine swung her stick at the horse's legs, making it rear. The rider slipped, nearly falling. He recovered quickly, fury on his face, and came at her on foot. She was a farmer's wife who'd never been in a real fight. He was a trained warrior. The outcome should have been obvious. But Catherine had spent 2 years alone after her husband died, defending her property from thieves and predators. She'd learned that survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being willing to do whatever it took. When he swung at her head, she ducked and drove forward, ramming her shoulder into his stomach with all her weight. He stumbled back, surprised. She swung the stick hard, catching him across the knee. He went down. 2 Comanche women were on him immediately, disarming him, binding him. But Catherine didn't have time to feel relief. Another attacker was coming, then another. The battle had spilled into the heart of the camp. She fought alongside the women, protecting the children who huddled behind them. A club caught her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. She kept fighting. A blade sliced across her forearm. Blood soaked her sleeve. She kept fighting. Time became strange and elastic. Every moment felt like an hour. Every heartbeat sounded loud as thunder. She didn't see the arrow coming. It hit her left shoulder from behind, the impact spinning her around. She fell hard. The wind knocked from her lungs. Pain washed over her in waves so intense she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Through blurring vision, she saw an attacker standing over her, raising his weapon for the killing blow. Then Little Hawk was there. The 7-year-old threw himself between Catherine and the warrior, spreading his arms wide. "No," he screamed in Comanche. "She's my mother. You can't hurt my mother." The warrior hesitated, confused by this child defending a white woman. That moment of hesitation was enough. Running Wolf appeared like a storm, slamming into the attacker with devastating force. The fight was brief and brutal. The attacker went down and didn't get up. Running Wolf knelt beside Catherine, his face tight with something she couldn't read. "Don't move," he said. "The arrow—" "The children," Catherine gasped. "Are they safe?" He looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "You're asking about the children? Are they safe?" she repeated, each word an effort. "Yes. Because of you and the other women." His hands were gentle as he examined the arrow in her shoulder. "You could have run. In the chaos, you could have escaped. No one would have seen." The thought honestly hadn't occurred to her. Catherine tried to say so, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. "Little Hawk," she whispered. "I'm here, Mother." The boy's tear-stained face appeared above her. "I'm right here. Good boy," she managed. "Brave boy." Then the darkness took her. She woke hours later in the teepee. Her shoulder was wrapped in bandages that smelled of herbs. The pain was immense but bearable. Someone had given her something for it. Gray Dove sat beside her. The old woman's face was different somehow. The coldness had cracked, revealing something softer underneath. "You are awake," Gray Dove said quietly. "The children?" Catherine's voice was rough. "All safe. Because the women fought well. Because you fought well." Gray Dove's weathered hand touched Catherine's uninjured arm just briefly. "You could have run." "I know, but you stayed. You bled for children who are not yours by blood. You nearly died protecting them." Catherine met the old woman's eyes. "They're mine by choice. That's stronger than blood." Something shifted in Gray Dove's expression. Her eyes grew wet. "Singing Bird would have liked you," she whispered. She had a warrior's heart, too, and she loved fiercely. "I see that same love in you when you look at my grandson." It was the first time Gray Dove had acknowledged her as anything but an intruder. "I miss her," Catherine said honestly. "Even though I never knew her. I miss her because Little Hawk misses her, and that breaks my heart." Gray Dove nodded slowly. Then she did something that shocked Catherine to her core. The old woman leaned forward and pressed her forehead against Catherine's for just a moment. "You are Comanche now," Gray Dove said, truly, not because of ceremony or words, because you chose us when you could have chosen freedom. "Welcome, daughter." The word daughter hung in the air between them. Running Wolf entered the teepee then. He looked exhausted, streaked with dirt and blood. His eyes went immediately to Catherine. "How is she?" he asked his mother. "Strong," Grey Dove said simply. She stood and moved to give them privacy, like a Comanche woman should be. Running Wolf knelt beside Catherine. For a long moment he just looked at her. "You saved several children today," he said finally, "including our son." "He saved me first," Catherine replied. "He threw himself in front of that warrior." "I know. I saw." Running Wolf's voice was thick with emotion. "He called you his mother." "In battle, facing death, he called you his mother." "I am his mother," Catherine said simply. Running Wolf reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he'd truly touched her since the ceremony. His calloused fingers wrapped around hers carefully. "I have been waiting," he admitted, "watching for you to betray us, watching for you to reveal your true nature. But today I saw your true nature, and it is brave, and honorable, and Comanche." The wall between them crumbled. "Not completely, not yet, but enough. I am sorry I doubted you," he said quietly. "My son knew your heart before I did." Catherine squeezed his hand. "You had every reason to doubt. I was your enemy." "You were never my enemy," Running Wolf said. "I just couldn't see it yet." Little Hawk burst into the tipi then, unable to wait any longer. He threw himself carefully beside Catherine, mindful of her injury. "You're awake," he cried. "I was so scared. I thought—" His voice broke. "I'm all right," Catherine assured him, reaching up with her good arm to stroke his hair. "Takes more than an arrow to stop me." "You're the bravest person I know," Little Hawk said fiercely. "Braver than any warrior." Running Wolf smiled at his son's words. Then he looked at Catherine again, and this time there was no doubt in his eyes. Only respect. And perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of something deeper. Outside, the camp was already returning to normal. The attackers had been driven off. The wounded were being tended. Life continued, and Catherine realized something profound. She was no longer a captive pretending to belong. She was home. Catherine's shoulder healed slowly over the winter months. The scar it left was jagged and deep, a permanent reminder of the day she'd chosen her new people over her old life. She wore it with quiet pride. Everything changed after the battle. The women who'd avoided her before now included her in their work. They taught her songs, shared stories, asked for her help with tasks. When she made mistakes with the language, they corrected her gently instead of with mockery. Grey Dove became her strongest ally. The old woman taught her the sacred traditions, the ceremonies, the deep knowledge that was passed from mother to daughter. "You must know these things," she'd say, "so you can teach them to your children." Your children. Not just Little Hawk, but the children Catherine might have in the future. The acceptance in those words made Catherine's throat tight with emotion every time. Running Wolf changed too. The distance between them disappeared gradually, replaced by something warmer. He taught her to ride the way Comanche rode, fast and fearless. He told her stories about his own childhood, about Singing Bird, about the old ways that were slowly fading. One night, sitting by the fire while Little Hawk slept, Running Wolf said, "I never thought I could love again after Singing Bird died. I thought that part of me had died with her." Catherine looked at him, her heart beating faster. "But grief is strange," he continued, staring into the flames. "It doesn't replace love. It just makes room for something different, something new." He met her eyes. "You are not a replacement for her. You are something else entirely. And I find myself grateful every day that my son saw what I was too blind to see." Catherine reached for his hand. "I loved my husband," she said quietly. "And I love the boy you gave me. And somehow, without even realizing when it happened, I've come to love you too." The words hung between them, honest and unadorned. Running Wolf leaned forward and kissed her forehead, gentle as falling snow. "Then we are blessed," he whispered. "Both of us." 2 years passed in a rhythm of seasons. Catherine's Comanche became fluent. Her hands grew skilled at the work of camp life. She learned to read the weather, to track animals, to heal with herbs. Little Hawk grew taller and stronger. He laughed often now, played with the other boys, showed no signs of the hollow grief that had nearly consumed him. He still called Catherine mother without hesitation, and Running Wolf father with pride. Catherine gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1871. The baby had dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold the sky. Little Hawk was devoted to his little sister from the moment he first held her. "She's perfect," he declared. "The best sister anyone could have." Grey Dove helped with the birth, her experienced hands steady and sure. Afterward, she held her new granddaughter and smiled, a real smile full of joy. "Two grandchildren," she said. "One who came to me through blood, one who came through choice, and now this little one who is both. I am rich beyond measure. Life was good. Hard, but good. The kind of good that comes from knowing your place in the world and the people around you." Then came the day the soldiers arrived. It was late summer, hot and still. Catherine was working on a hide when she heard the commotion at the edge of camp. Riders approaching. Not Comanche. Not another tribe. U.S. Army. Her blood went cold. Running Wolf appeared at her side immediately. "Stay calm," he said quietly. "They come to talk, not fight. They carry a white flag." The soldiers numbered about 15, led by a captain with tired eyes and dust-covered uniform. They rode into camp slowly, hands away from weapons. The whole tribe gathered to hear what they wanted. The captain spoke through a translator, a man of mixed blood who switched between English and Comanche. "We're here about the white captives," the captain said. "We have reports that several white women were taken in raids over the past few years. We've been authorized to negotiate for their return." Catherine's stomach dropped. The captain continued. "We know at least one white woman is in this camp. We're prepared to offer horses, supplies, and safe passage for her return to white settlements. We're not here to make trouble. We just want to bring our people home." The translator's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Catherine. She stood between Running Wolf and Little Hawk, her daughter strapped to her back in a cradleboard. "That's her," the translator said to the captain in English. "The woman there with the native dress." The captain looked at Catherine for a long moment. His expression shifted from official determination to confusion. She didn't look like a captive. She looked like exactly what she was, a Comanche woman with her family. "Ma'am," the captain called out in English, "are you being held here against your will?" Every eye in the camp turned to Catherine. This was the moment. She could say yes, could ask for rescue, could return to the world of farms and settlements and white people, could leave everything she'd built here. Little Hawk's hand slipped into hers, his grip tight. Running Wolf stood straight beside her, his face carefully neutral. But she could see the tension in his jaw, the fear in his eyes that he was trying to hide. Her daughter made a small sound against her back, content and sleepy. Grey Dove watched from nearby, her weathered face impossible to read. Catherine stepped forward. Running Wolf's hand twitched like he wanted to stop her, but he held still. She faced the captain and spoke in clear English. "I am Catherine Bennett. I was taken in a raid 2 years ago from a settlement near Fort Griffin." The captain nodded, relief crossing his face. "Then you're free to come with us, ma'am. We'll escort you safely back to—" "I'm not finished," Catherine interrupted. She gestured to Little Hawk, who'd followed her. "This is my son, and the baby on my back is my daughter. That man there," she pointed to Running Wolf, "is my husband." The captain's mouth opened, then closed. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. You're free now. You don't have to stay here anymore." "You're not listening," Catherine said firmly. "I'm not a captive. I'm Comanche. This is my family. This is my home." "But you're white," the captain said, clearly struggling to understand. "I was white," Catherine corrected. "Now I'm Comanche. There's a difference." The translator spoke rapidly to the elders in Comanche, explaining the exchange. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The captain looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Ma'am, with all due respect, these people are hostiles. They're enemies of the United States. If you stay here, you'll be living outside the law." "Outside civilization," Catherine almost laughed. "Civilization? You mean the civilization that left me alone after my husband died? The civilization where I was just another poor widow nobody cared about?" She shook her head. "I found more humanity here, among people you call savages, than I ever found in your civilization." "Think about what you're saying," the captain pleaded. "Think about your future. These tribes are being pushed onto reservations. Their way of life is ending. If you stay, you'll suffer with them." "Then I'll suffer with my family," Catherine said simply, "just like they would suffer with me." Little Hawk stepped forward then, standing beside Catherine. He spoke in English, words he'd been practicing. "She is my mother. She chose us. We choose her. She stays. The captain looked at the boy, at Catherine, at the baby on her back. His shoulders sagged. "I can't force you," he said quietly. "If you're truly staying by choice," he trailed off, shaking his head. "I am," Catherine said. "Completely by choice." The captain pulled out a piece of paper. "Then I need you to sign this. A statement that you're refusing rescue. So the army knows we tried." He paused. "So they know you chose this." Catherine took the pen he offered. Her hand didn't shake as she signed her old name one last time. Catherine Bennett. That person felt like someone from another life. As the soldiers prepared to leave, the captain spoke once more. "I don't understand your choice, ma'am, but I hope you don't come to regret it." Catherine looked at Running Wolf, who was watching her with such fierce love it made her breath catch. At Little Hawk, who'd been brave enough to choose her when he was drowning in grief. At Grey Dove, who'd become the mother she'd lost years ago. At her baby daughter, who would grow up knowing she was loved beyond measure. "Regret?" Catherine said softly. "How could I regret finding a family that chose me as much as I chose them?" The soldiers rode away, leaving dust in their wake. The camp was silent for a moment. Then Grey Dove began to sing. It was an old song, a welcoming song, sung when someone joined the tribe. Other voices joined hers, filling the air with music. Running Wolf walked to Catherine and took her hand. "You could have left," he said. "I was already home," she replied. Little Hawk wrapped his arms around both of them. "Forever?" he asked. "Forever," Catherine promised. That night the whole camp celebrated, not because the soldiers had left, but because Catherine had made her choice clear for everyone to see. She was one of them, not by capture or force, but by her own free will. As the fire burned low and people drifted to their teepees, Catherine sat with her family beneath the stars. Her daughter slept against her chest. Little Hawk dozed with his head on her lap. Running Wolf's arm was warm around her shoulders. She thought about the woman she'd been, alone, grieving, struggling to survive in a world that felt cold and empty. She thought about the woman she'd become, a mother, a wife, a member of a community that had welcomed her when she proved herself worthy. The journey between those two women had been painful and strange and completely unexpected. A grieving boy had chosen her for reasons he probably couldn't even explain. A skeptical father had learned to trust her. An entire tribe had accepted her, and she had chosen them right back. "What are you thinking?" Running Wolf asked quietly. Catherine looked up at the stars, so bright here where no city lights dimmed them. "I'm thinking," she said, "that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born to. And I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest woman alive." Running Wolf pulled her closer. Little Hawk mumbled in his sleep, something about hunting with his father tomorrow. Catherine closed her eyes and smiled. She was home. Finally, truly home, and that was worth everything.